Hey, good day. Thank you for joining us here at Roots and Reason. I'm Preston,
I'm Holland.
and today we're going to have just a short stream and kind of continue on with our project. What do you have going today, Holland?
Not much. Just got school coming up and probably hitting the gym, trying to make the most of my time in college, which is a hard battle.
Gym, school, and of course, let everybody know kind of where you're going that direction with at
Uh,
least in mind.
well, I mean, I'm planning on going to law school if that's what you're referring to, but
Right.
that's next year. Thankfully, I still have some time in undergrad to kind of relax.
Okay. So you're kind of doing the white water trip. It's like, I know I'm going down this river in a general direction and figuring out as you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a long journey. I really want to do like public interest work, but it's a broad category, so I can kind of just figure it out as I go, which is really nice. Pick up some internships here and there.
Right. Okay. I know you'd mentioned one time to me about some charity stuff. Is that kind of something you're into?
Yeah, I volunteer a decent amount, and that's really what I like to do with my time. I work with orgs for most of my time back home. In my internships, I work with anti-trafficking orgs.
Okay. And I'm assuming human trafficking.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Not like exotic pets or ivory or something.
No, I mean that's very important work, but it's just not what I do.
Right. Wow. You have a lot on your plate.
Well, I try to keep busy.
Okay. Now I understand why you are way more organized than I am. You would have to be able to
I
keep.
try. I like to think that I'm organized, but I don't think I actually am.
Okay. So what else is going on today? You got school, going back to school kind of stuff. You coming out of spring break?
Yeah, I mean, we just had spring break about 2 weeks ago, and since I'm a senior, we have like a capstone project. So we have a huge research fund that we get to use to do a. For my major is which is basically political science. You get to do a research project on the community that you live in. So we're doing an economic mobility food desert project. So I'm just trying to like wrap that up in this next month because I graduate at the end of April.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the real stuff kicks in.
Yeah. then I have to
Okay.
focus on law school.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Well, great. You know what? That actually kind of dovetails into the question I have for you kind of today, or one
Yeah.
of them is I got to thinking about this after our last cast of being someone that I see the end game of retirement coming for me.
Yeah.
And there was a time I actually wrote a lot of poetry, and there was a piece of poetry I once wrote called Dwell Not. And I once sent, I think, a little meme thing to you. It's like, don't look back, you're not going that way. And after kind of the some of the conversation we had last time, maybe this is kind of a two-part question, but one thing that I'm kind of curious of in the little bit of discussion that we've had, what does it mean to you,
Hmm.
American values? We hear that term used in media, the news, other podcasts, people pondering the depths of the world, and you hear it get thrown around all the time. It's like American values. And it's like, well, I know what that means to me and why I kind of have certain struggles with where we're kind of at in society today. But what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's changed over time because I grew up thinking it meant like the white picket fence, having the opportunity to make money. But as I grow older, I've kind of really come to terms with what it means to have freedom and the discourse that comes with that. I actually look at our media and it's frustrating because it's hard to see that much division, but that also means that we are in a time where we have enough freedom to disagree with each other, and I see that as a really positive thing. And so I feel like American values to me, at the top of it is obviously freedom, but I think a lot of people would agree with that. And like to me, that means autonomy, free speech, freedom of religion, and just kind of living in this melting pot where we actually can express all these different ideas and have conflicts without it being a prosecutable charge, basically. Like that's something that a lot
Right.
of countries don't have, and I have really come to terms with the freedom of America basically being proven by our division, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, I when I was probably more your age, I think it was the term freedom to me was more like I let the dog out the door and he's free to roam in the yard.
Yeah.
There's the freedom of like travel and movement and sort of thing. As I've gotten older, now I've kind of, it occurs to me more of the importance of the other part of the freedom is free speech that you mentioned. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the thing that said how our speeches and our language is like kind of like the movie Arrival. It communicates what you think.
Mm-hmm.
Con- when people restrain the freedom of speech, you're kind of refraining, in a sense, their freedom of thought. It's not that it's like, okay, it's wrong think, we're not in the future sci-fi thing, but when you go around with someone and you say you shouldn't do these things, people self-censor,
Mm-hmm.
and as a consequence of that, you're you're like being intellectually dishonest with yourself. Um, One of the things I envy about you at the moment of being in college is like the one time you get to go in your life to challenge ideas.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see stuff that you hate, some stuff that you love, people with the wackiest ideas and conspiracy theories and stuff you don't understand. And the whole point is to challenge that and say, let me think about that. And if you're not really free to kind of, if you come into this self censor kind of a thing, what the hell is that going to do for your education or how you learn to construct the world that's ahead of you? Because as a young woman, you've got to go through higher education.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, okay, you're trying to what? Prepare yourself for a career or something,
Yeah.
that's going to do the rest of your life. No, not small, no big deal. Just the rest of your entire life.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a big deal. And then you got to throw in things like family and all this other kind of stuff in the back end of that. And it's like, okay. So, yeah, I wonder. I mean, I think some of that we align. Maybe is, I don't know. I read certain things and it's like, it occurs to me that it's what started out as freedom of motion comes up here in the old jelly roll upstairs of it really actually is important. I think our society was, someone once said that the United States has the worst form of government except for all the rest.
Yeah.
And we were a grand experiment in human history.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you. This is another thing to kind of dovetail into. I'm kind of curious about. One of the things I did like about the kind of the Trump election
Yeah.
was the fighting back against censorship, and we're seeing that. That's actually big new stuff going on right now with Congress. Had the hearings yesterday, and Matt Taibbi and stuff back up there, as well as the former czar of speech disinformation, czar or whatever she was, Kara or whatever her name was. But yes, we watched what's happening in Europe. There was a man put in jail
Mm-hmm.
for saying a prayer inside his head. He wasn't speaking out loud in the UK,
Yeah.
outside of an abortion clinic.
Yeah.
He happened to be a pro-life person, and it's like, okay, that's fine. He stood outside within like 200 feet of an abortion clinic and said a silent prayer to himself and ended up in jail.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is just like, how is that possible? That sounds literally like the horror story that was 1984, Goldstein.
Yeah. I feel like it's come from a place of there's a time where you should say what's on your mind and there is a time where you should censor what you're actually thinking, but that has been pushed to the extremes because people weren't able to determine when those topics should be brought up. So it's like, okay, well, instead of just letting everyone talk all the time, it's way easier to just do the opposite. If we just limit speech, then there's less byproduct to deal with, which is really an interesting way to look at it. And I think it's hard because there is truth on both sides. Like, yes, you should have ultimate free speech and you should have freedom of thought, but that doesn't necessarily mean you get free reign to do whatever you want. I mean, that's just the
Right,
basis of America, is this balance of your freedom comes at the cost of your unfreedom. There are certain things you can't do
right.
so that you can keep your freedoms. And how do you balance that in the sense of like online? information and speech online, because that wasn't even something that our founders were
Right.
thinking about.
Or
And
even me, the
yeah,
online world is new, so.
it's crazy. And how do you prosecute online crimes? It kind of all bundles together with, where does the line of freedom begin and end? Like, what, to what extent can you say something, and use that sense of freedom without it coming at the cost of someone else's freedom and their ability to go about their life? So it's like hate speech. Like, that's a form of speech that's not necessarily protected under free speech. But then what do you qualify as hate speech? I think
Well,
that's
right. Who
really a,
determines what
yeah,
technically it is? Because the law is a very precise thing.
yes, which is, it's hard to go into these topics because we are a system of common law, case law, and we don't have case law to work off of because it's all so new. So it's, how do you navigate
Right.
these topics in a way that engages all perspectives, but also keeps the roots of, okay, yes, we want to appease everyone. This is a country where we want to encourage freedom of thought without it pushing boundaries. Like, what are the boundaries and how do you navigate those?
Right. Well, that's an interesting to this is literally there was no internet. I mean, I went to my original thing for college was network administration. There was
Yeah.
no Wi-Fi. A lot of what I learned in school is almost pretty worthless and archaic. I'm like an old fossil now, um, but an interesting kind of thing that I've talked with other people, friends my age, and even others. When I go into places like the one space that I do social media, I suppose, is Twitter, X, um, and some of the vitriol of what people are just easily spew out there, just nonsensical, lunatic fringe kind of a stuff, and they're angry and hateful, and it's like, would you go into a biker bar and tap that guy you disagree with on the shoulder and say, "Yo, Joe, biker guy, I think you're a moron"? Of course not,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a certain level of interpersonal accountability.
Yeah.
You and I having a conversation, we can read body language, and when you get in an online environment, that's all gone.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has a screen name. You're, robo tax guy or what. Your blank space just spewing stuff out on the net like a
Yeah.
super bite. And I wonder if what the effects do you think that will be? And then you would be a good measurement for this of your generation, men and women, of because you've literally grown up always having the net.
Yeah.
So do you think that has any effect on kind of the ability to have discourse?
I think it does, not just on a relational aspect, but even a legal aspect. Like, how do you really address what it means to be a person? Like, if you're this online character, you don't really use your full name, you're taking on a different persona. So, is that even a crime between two people? And then you bring that relational, it's like, if you can't even prosecute something because there's such a lack of relational aspect, there's such a lack of, oh well, there was intent behind that for that specific person in the real world, then how do you expect to say that the relationships you're creating are real and there is a connection there? Because everything is just like you said, it's so impersonal. You can't read body language, you don't really know what someone's thinking behind a screen because there is so much freedom to just say what you want because you know it's not actually gonna hit someone. But I think there's also something to be said about, well, there could be harm coming out of these cyber things. Like, there's people that give away tons of money to cyber scams because they genuinely think someone's gonna come after them, or they think someone is already in danger. So it's like, how do you really address on a wide broad scale how it's going to implement to each and every person? It's so individualistic.
I would even maybe go a step further to say one of the a weird benefit I don't think a lot of people give credit to is with anonymity, that screen name, you're driving an avatar, a digital
Yeah.
representation of whatever your thoughts are of that day. It also kind of gives you the ability to speak the truth without fear of consequence.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something of some particular, we look at things, race, religion, politics, all the deep stuff we're always in the past we're raised, never talk about that stuff. Now somebody that wants to talk about that, they have ideas they want to express, but they're too afraid to because the church lady down the street's going to catch me or this group of people or whatever. Um, that allows people to explore ideas anonymously.
Hmm.
So I can see it's a double-edged swords kind of a thing. It's like on one hand, there's no consequence, but on the other hand, you have someone that has the ability to explore the truth of their true feelings
Yeah.
because there is no repercussion for that. Because hopefully, in our civil society here in the United States, we don't go off the deep end in any direction and preserve these kind of things of freedom of speech, not shooting one another out there. I mean, it's kind of getting a
Yeah.
little bit mad out there right now. I ain't gonna
It's
lie.
it is definitely an interesting dynamic. I think the fear of being able to freely explore without it being your actual identity attached to that is like incel culture. And these things kind of just brew under the surface, and because they are so, people know you're not supposed to talk about it in public. Like, you're not supposed to be sexist in public. You're not supposed to hate certain races or cultures in public, but they still are carrying around these deep
Right.
hatred based feelings. And so what happens when they're finding this community online, but you can't really track it back to a person? And so it's still existing in our world, but it's existing without a way to track it or be like, hey, that person's kind of crazy, like he has some racist thoughts, he might be a danger. Now they can be completely normal in your face-to-face interactions with them and live a completely different life online. I mean, a lot of school shooter um, beliefs
Yeah.
come from online culture, and it's like, how do you balance the freedom of thought with the idea that they're not really getting the full picture because they are pursuing something so anonymously?
Do you think maybe in the future there might be some sort of a thing where you, to get on social media of various things, that requires like a verification, kind of like when setting some of this stuff up for our podcast? It's having to go through a next level of verification I've never been through online with YouTube. Um, I've got to take a video of myself doing things, following instruction. It's like, okay, we know he's a person. We got his credit card, the most important thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, we can track all that back. Another way is literally to put your driver's license up there and say, look, this is who I am. This isn't that avatar that, some lunatic out there is driving around. I, I see the benefits of it, but like legally, do you think that we're going to get to a place in the future where they might require some sort of.
I mean, I think there's some websites that will require it, but it's just not possible to regulate online behavior. It's just such a taboo subject, and it's such a widespread thing. I mean, the internet just is not just in America. It's worldwide, right?
Right,
So there's always going to be ways around it. People can create loopholes. There's a dark web. There's ways to not be tracked, and the more that we try and enforce something, there's going to be hackers that find a way around it. So it's
right,
not really something that's ever going to be applicable, which makes it an even scarier topic because it's not, you can't regulate it.
right. Yeah, I don't have no clue where it's going. I mean, I was pretty proud of myself, pat myself on the back to say the internet's going to be the big thing. The one thing that I totally missed, I didn't know that smartphones were going to be such a thing that we've turned an entire culture of people into zombies.
Yeah.
And I go into a restaurant, which is very seldom, but I look and it's like, there's nobody hardly talking. There's literally a man and a woman sitting next to each other, across from each other in a booth, and they're both looking at their phone. And I'm like, what's the point?
Yeah.
What are you going to plug yourself in the back of your skull and just like lean back on the couch and, I'm zoning out over in the virtual world? That's really bizarre to me. There's like too much online interaction in some regards. It's like, there's a whole world out there full
Yeah.
of trees and birds and critters and other people. And I don't know, go out there sometime.
Yeah.
Uh, but again, that's probably from being kind of more of the boomer, kind of being country, rural, I
I
guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that side of it, but the nice thing about having the internet and the unlimited access is to do things like this. I mean, you can communicate on a broader scale and actually learn of ideas outside your bubble, which is the American dream. It is the
Right.
Wild West. Like, this is, we're bringing back what we originally wanted, but now we have to face the repercussions of actually having that freedom. And I think it scares people because you want the freedom to say what you want, but you don't want other people to have the freedom to say what they want.
Right.
And It's
Well,
just
now
like
I
might be
do.
the issue of
I
time.
do. I love it. Again, maybe it was because the whole point of we're supposed to challenge each other in ideas. That's kind of the whole thing. You're absolutely right. Like, look, free speech, it's a critically important thing, but it can be dangerous.
Yeah,
Um, as a consequence, you should treat it with great responsibility. Like saying, yeah,
100%.
don't go into the theater and scream fire, obviously. Um, and again, I don't want to turn into Europe. I'm watching what's taking place in Europe, and I would not be surprised within the next 2, 3 years, maybe not even that long. France, the UK, or Germany, one of the three,
Hmm.
they're going to snap. I mean, we're telling the people that we don't like their politics. We're going to basically lawfare them out of being
Yeah.
able to run for. And these are people that the majority of the people in a population want. I don't think it's going to turn out good for Europe. It's looking kind of ugly over there, but anyway.
Yeah, it's dangerous on both sides for sure. You can't cut off communication. I really feel like freedom of speech only works if it's actual freedom of speech in a public forum. You can't the secret underground idea of it is dangerous, and I think cancel culture produced it. So it's like, how do you cut back on that shame or fear of discussion?
Better ideas. Isn't that the whole point of it? It's like, look, if you get some lunatic or hateful person and say, okay, like the Nazis in Skokie, Illinois, where the ACLU of all people
Hmm.
defended Nazis marching in Chicago. Why? Because it was a free speech thing. They
Yeah,
said, yes, we find them vile and despicable people, but freedom of speech is that important that we're willing, the ACLU,
yeah.
to stick up for these people, kind of thing, because you combat bad ideas and bad speech with better ideas and better speech. You just win the
And then
argument.
you know where it exists too. It's not just this, oh, I know it's around me, but I don't really know who it is. Like, you really have to face your ideas and face the reality of what's going on in the world, which I don't think a lot of people want to do. It's nice to live in this, like, oh, I just kind of don't want to know my neighbor. I don't know, want to know what they think because I don't want to get into that conversation. And really facing it head on and yeah, spreading better ideas, having good conversations.
Yeah, well, I'm probably a little bit guilty of that in real life. Being as rural as I am, I probably should interact with my neighbors a little bit more. But and they live so far away.
Yeah, it's hard. Well, I mean, there's always different ways around it too. Like, who is your neighbor and who do we know?
Well, right, rural Tennessee in this particular place, they say up on the mountain.
Yeah,
Most people mind their own business, and they want everybody else to mind their own business, kind of a thing. I don't want
yeah.
to know what you do over there, but as long as you ain't over here, or we lean up against the fence and talk about gardens and goats or something, we're good to go. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's a dying culture, I have to say,
Yeah,
Appalachia. So
yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
awesome. Well, thank you. Interesting. Seems like we started out certainly in the same place, but again, being a younger person today, it is interesting to me to see how I look at my own evolution, and it's like, where are you starting at?
Yeah.
If I'm still alive in 30 years, 40 years from now, I would love to be able to look back and let's touch back on that subject again. And it's like, so what do you think now, Holland?
On the values of America.
Right. Did it fulfill everything? I mean, how'd that all work out? How'd that go, kind of
Yeah.
thing?
I mean, I know it's a hopeful idea, but I am chronically optimistic. I feel
I
like
am.
I feel like I'm a realist because I see what's happening now and I can really address it on a real level, but I have really big hopes and dreams for the future.
Well, I mean, because you're literally coming into this. Honestly, it's one of the most important parts of your entire life.
Mhm.
Again, no pressure. You're just trying to
Yeah.
drive your whole future. And you're coming out of the end of cancel culture. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
I kind of see a little bit on the right. So anyway, hopefully we can get through all of that.
Yeah.
I would love to have America go back to like boring days of Walter Cronkite going, and here's what happened in the news today. And it was just I would give anything for boring in the news.
See, I don't even want boring. I just want less sensational, algorithm based. You need your attention based news. I like the discourse. I like the age of podcasts, obviously. And I like people having real conversations about news topics because I feel like that's what is happening around the dinner table, and it's good to demonstrate what you want to happen in society, and discussion is what I would want to happen in society. So
Right.
I'm not against the discussion. Sure, the news being heavily biased, I would love to go away, but I think that having a whole rounded discussion about the news is something that I'm grateful is happening.
Oh yeah, I think the whole new, I call it now the mainstream media. It's the rise. Really, Joe Rogan kind of is the one that set that all on fire. And now I look at some of the people that I look, the Brett Weinstein and Unheard and Chris Williams. There's a bunch of them out there that are all in podcasts. Patrick Bet
Yeah.
and Tucker, even people I disagree with, but it's like high level of content of
Hmm.
people having discourse, and it's not. They are exploring ideas, and I think there's a hunger for it. And obviously, otherwise, it wouldn't be exploding. And
Yeah.
you look at CNN, MSNBC, the numbers are plummeting. And I want to say good riddance to them all.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sorry to see them go,
No.
because you're right. It's like, okay, we battle ideas in this kind of a forum of stuff, long form, engage communities, other people, um, to try to have honest discussions about something, right, wrong, even if we're smart or dumb about it, but have discussions that's not, we're not trying to spin a narrative of, you look at stuff, oh no, Hunter's laptop, that's just all Russian propaganda kind of a thing. It's
Yeah.
like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, we see it. So I don't know. Hopefully, go new media is all I can say.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see where it goes. I had a question for you. I mean, this might be a little hard to explain, so I'm going to give a little bit background after I pose the question. But I mean, what does it mean to be a man in 2025? We see a lot of. I know it's a hard question, so I mean, I don't expect there to be a clear answer, and I think that's why there needs to be a conversation about it. What inspired me is I was going through this book called Of Boys and Men by Richard V. Reeves, and it's a pretty new book that he published, but it talks about how men are falling behind in school, and toxic masculinity is kind of attacking what it means to be masculine, and kind of denying this idea of a sex difference. But like, what does it mean if you're discouraging toxic masculinity? Then what is positive masculinity? Like, how do
Right.
you encourage men to be masculine without encouraging sexism or aggression?
Right. Oh, yeah, that's lot there.
Yeah, I know it's a hard.
I was, yeah, I mean, I was raised by a widowed mother
Hmm.
with 5 people in my family. And I ain't gonna lie, I was a mama's boy. I love my mother. I worship the ground that woman walked on.
Hmm.
So I went through a formidable part of my life with no male influence until I was in my very late teens. My peers were, my male peers were my influence.
Hmm.
And I mentioned off screen one time of my friend is up in Chicago, who I've known since going on 50 years now. Um, Boys get off the bus stop that have a problem, and we would duke it out. One gets a bloody nose, he falls on the ground. The little crowd of kids at the bus stop declares one the winner, and you go away. A week later, you're sitting with this kid in the lunchroom, sipping on a chocolate milk, eating Friday pizza in the lunchroom.
Hmm.
Men get over that stuff. They just don't seem to carry a grudge very long. Um, and we are physical, we're rough and tumble. I think we're also the victims of a lot of ADHD. Let's pump these kids full of medication because they don't sit still in their seats.
Yeah.
Men were never intended to sit in the seats. I mean, when you look at Alexander the Great was 16 years old. And he's over there conquering Mesopotamia. And I was like, what the hell? He's conquering the known world by when he's 21.
Yeah.
And it's like, I talk to a lot of 21 years old now, and they can't go 9 times 9 times 9. And it's like, wait a minute, you can't even do you find words as violence?
Hmm.
I think that there was a good use for feminism of, yeah, women need to get caught up in the speed. Same thing with Jim Crow era. You got to get through those difficult racial things. You have to address the ugly parts of our past.
Yeah.
In the case of feminism, I just simply think it went too far. It stopped becoming equality for women, and it's revenge. Let's go get the men back, grind them into the dirt, and show them the toxic. when I look around, it's no longer about being equal. It's about being right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a weird competition. Women can do everything men can. Sure about that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a lot of women linemen out there, bricklayers and coal miners. Why ain't you like? Now, a lot of them want to line up to be a CEO of XYZ company. Ain't none of them wanting to mine coal
Yeah.
or cut timber. So, okay, it's not about equality. Um, it's about power. And it's just kind of the unfortunate thing that people get drunk on. Rather it's through feminism or a group of anything. The DI was really bad. Identity politics is bad about that. They call it power politics or whatever. Anyway, we see it in actual politics. Same thing. It's not about having a better idea. It's about, I worry a little bit about Trump being vengeful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot about crush your enemies. It's like, look, we're not at war with each other. We're fellow Americans here. But toxic male. I don't know. We in colleges, women outnumber men by a growing, even larger margin.
Mm-hmm.
Far, far fewer men are going into college.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Testosterone rates amongst men are collapsing. And I'm talking young guys. These are the virile young studs that walk around like cock of the hen house kind of a thing. Ain't there that way. I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing young men who don't even want to bother to get a driver's license. It's like you don't even want the freedom to get in your car with your buddies and hit across state lines and go drink your favorite beer behind dad's back at a river. Something. No interest in any of that. It's a lot of it's screen time with video games and constant online whatever.
Yeah.
In addition to that, men don't also seem to have any interest in relationships. And I've watched a million of these. There's whole channels dedicated to this stuff of women want a man that's 6 foot minimum.
Yeah.
He needs to make at least $700,000 a year. And it's like you're going through the list of it, and it's like, holy hell, I want that guy. I want to marry him. I'm going to turn gay or something. I want to find a guy like that. Are you kidding me? What the hell has got into you? That's not real. That's not. Those men exist, but they're like 2%.
Yeah.
And that means what? 80% of the women are going to compete for that one guy? Lady, seeing your profile out there on Tinder, you ain't going to make it. As a consequence of just the whole toxic stuff against men, we're in a bad place. And I think I understand. I don't always agree with it, why they have what do they call it? The MGTOW thing, men going their own way. Where men are just checking out, man. They're like, hell, I'm going to hang out with my buddies. I'll sit terminally online, play video games. What's the point? I go to school. They tell me I'm bad. I'm a phobe. I'm an ism. I'm a this. I'm a that. Those that actually get in, unless I conform to kind of what a bunch of women who happens to be HR and a lot of admissions. Oh, are you the right kind of guy? You're not wearing the hair bun. How dare you? Oh my God, you got a muscle shirt and go to the gym? Get out of here. You're never getting in here.
Yeah.
Screw that. I worry about it. I worry about things like birth rates are collapsing. Tough to be a man. How did I say to fix that? I don't know. I think men certainly should treat their wives as a cherished thing. I hope men think of their wives and mothers and sisters the way I thought of my mom. The world's changed as much. I can't say men are supposed to be sole provider. I'm not going to go down the total trad guy thing. The world really has changed. There's a lot of women out there that breadwinners.
Yep.
That are professional women. I'm all for it. Whatever dynamic works for you, but it's hard, I would imagine, as a woman, finding men who want to engage even in that. I'm watching it collapse, and it's actually really sad. I've listened to some of the Jordan Peterson stuff. I mean, his old stuff before he ever got famous. He had some good lessons in life.
Mm-hmm.
And they consider him a hateful person. And I'm like, really? Telling guys to get their shit together, get a plan, get your life together, learn how to get a job, stay stable, don't be a drug addict or drunk, and, provide for your family, do all of the things. And I see people online brag, well, I took care of Mike it. Well, no shit, you're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a father is supposed to do. That's all seemed like real basic stuff. Apparently, there used to be a handbook that they don't give out anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like the reason I asked the question is because the identity of man used to be the provider role. And now
Mhm.
that women are succeeding in school and the workplace, they don't really need to take on that role anymore. And so it feels like the masculine identity is kind of collapsing. So, like, what do you do from there? Like, how do you encourage these masculine traits that would benefit, like bravery and
Right,
courage and drive? Like, how do you encourage that side of masculinity without pushing the side that feminism took so long to try and
right.
eradicate?
Well, it was kind of funny. Is backstage early this morning, doing house cleaning around here. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine who's a boomer.
Mm-hmm.
We won't mention his name, but we were talking about how what the military does for boys and men. You're going to learn discipline. You learn how to kind of get your shit together. Even if you don't like the military, you are going to come out of that with a way to go to college, paid
Mm-hmm.
for. Um, and I know that's probably considered a toxic masculine thing. At the same time, you're going to be around a bunch of other men. Men need that. I would almost go so far as to say men actually need combat. They need some sort of a challenge. In the past, we would put armor on and grab a sword and run it through another person we disagreed with. We're a little bit more civilized than that today, although less chivalrous. At
Yeah.
the same time, this is also why we got sports.
Mm-hmm.
Men have to have a challenge. Another thing I would think is, and I hope to engage more in this myself, is to mentor others. When I look back, I think of 5 guys that were 6 to 10, 12 years older than me, um, that passed down a lot of advice that kept me from doing even more stupid stuff than I did. Uh, and it really guided me in an incredibly important time in life. And male influence, if you're going to be a father or adopted father or whatever, um, step up to that role, be a part of raising your kids, particularly boys.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is kind of sometimes we need our backside whipped. There's sometimes you got to have tough love. And I think that there's a lot of things that could be done. Well, I can't change the opinions of how women see things. How to correct that amongst men. I would tell other men, you can find someone that you can mentor, somebody that you can help. Even if it's like, Lord knows, I have no higher education type of skills that would be even relevant to try to pass on to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, like through our discussions, is, well, I can give you some anecdotal life things of whatever you do, don't do this. I don't care
Yeah.
what age you live in. This was a dumb idea.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, yeah, there kind of needs to be a little bit of that. Another thing is that people have to have a purpose,
Mm.
men particularly. Um, I think that's, again, Alexander wasn't conquering the known world at the time for no reason. And, he's trying to build his kingdom. And maybe your kingdom is just a half-acre lot of a house you paid off by yourself. Well, by God, that's a worthy kingdom. Go do it. Build it.
Mm-hmm.
Go through the steps that you got to go through. Lord knows, again, like I said, how many mistakes I've made. Well, I don't want to count them. But it was a little bit later in life for me. I was a late bloomer.
Uh-huh.
When you start figuring it out, it's all of a sudden I think to myself, well, it's not a regret thing, but I wish I would have started sooner.
Yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
wish I would have had better influence of men to like, Preston, get your shit straight. You know, this is what you need to kind of do. Nose to the grindstone. You got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it is effort. It's construction and discipline, which I totally lacked. Um, but I think other men need to really step up. And I would like to see, I know a lot of the Gen Z stuff, or probably more millennials we were talking about the other day,
Mm-hmm.
blaming the boomers for the destruction of civilization, making housing prices and wages, the economy what it is today. Well, guess what, boomers, to the extent that you had any kind of a role in that, grandpa and uncle, here's your opportunity to go find a niece, nephew, and give them some guidance. I mean,
Yeah.
here in Appalachia, believe it or not, there's houses that would have two front doors
Mm-hmm.
because portion of the house was for grandma and grandpa. The rest of the house was for the rest of the family. You all lived under one roof, but it's kind of like two separate houses.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that, there was no need for childcare because that's what grandma and grandpa were for.
Yeah.
And honestly, we're probably going to need to go back to something like that for
Mm-hmm.
the sake of literally society generally, because where we're going now just ain't sustainable. I don't see it. I don't know if you see it different, but
No, I definitely see it, and that's why I wanted to bring it up as a question. I mean, kind of going off of your thing for men needing a passion, in the book by Richard B. Reeves, he added this study, and it was talking about how women are more likely to have a sense of fulfillment and passion in multiple areas of their life: family, work, outside like charity work. But men are more likely to find that in career, and today they aren't even finding that in career. So like, where does that leave
right,
them passion wise? And it's hard to think about ways to instill a sense of meaning into someone without there being that sense of mentorship and sense of like, oh, I
right.
want to be where that person is, I look up to him, I look up to this way of life, because I think they want that. I don't think that the men in my age are going around thinking that they're wasting their life or that they're not doing the most. They just don't have any other direction. So it's like, how do you build this community of mentorship where the older generation does want to
Mm-hmm.
give back and see the next generation be lifted up and kind of be willing to take on that negative uh like viewpoint that the younger generation has adopted. Like that, you really have to have a thick skin, um,
Right.
on going both ways, and I kind of feel like that's a lost thing in our culture.
Well, right. I mean, as mentioned before, there are young people who feel that words are violence, and I'm like, are you kidding me? We have. I'm sure probably you have. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt. It's literally a chant that kids would neener each other
Yeah.
on the playground. It's like whatever. Your parents would tell you, pay no mind, ignore them.
Hmm.
What great advice. Ignore them. And at least the online digital stuff, when you hear that kind of nonsense, goodbye.
Yeah.
It's done. We need to do probably a little bit more of
I think it's
that.
hard because there's no identity outside of the identity that others are giving my generation. Like we adopt and take on so much of our label by other people that anything that we get thrown at or gets thrown at us, it sticks because there's nothing else to hold on to. So it's like, how do you teach an entire generation to build their identity under their own beliefs, their own ideas, so that when they're getting thrown these labels, they have something else to hold on to?
Yeah, I'd hate to say this, and man, this will get me all kind of flack of stuff. This comes in kind of parenting style. On one hand, I understand that a parent, you want to protect your babies and want to grow them up and nurture them. You want them safe. No, no, no. You want to keep them from harm.
Yeah.
And in a weird thing, we're finding out now, like in health circles, where people who get excessive with germ cleaners and stuff like that, all of a sudden become the people who are the most susceptible to things like the flu. Because look, if your body's not exposed to the pathogens of the normal world that we live in, your body's never going to develop any of its own natural immunity to it. Yes, you're going to get sick, you're going to feel terrible, but the consequences of not doing it is you end up like my age or older, you get that same bug. Next thing you know, you're either in the emergency room or you're putting you in the ground.
Mm.
And if we don't treat the same thing with young people, you got to be able to kind of dip them into the sewer of life and expose them to the pathogens of ideas and words and concepts. But and I get it, parents want the safety thing, but in kind of a weird sort of way, it's like you try to make them too safe, you make them weak.
Yeah.
And I know that's probably sounds horrible to some people, but
No, it's true. I think it's funny because I grew up going to a private school, obviously, and a lot of that comes with the very extreme of you're very, very sheltered or you're not sheltered at all. And it's very interesting to watch the two dynamics play out now that there's freedom in college or post high school graduation. And you see how people are starting to develop their own identity. And the ones that had more freedom are coming out of it with a stronger sense of identity from high school, and they're not flying all over the charts as much. And the ones that
right,
came from a pretty strict background are really struggling to hold on to something other than their family values, which they don't even have the basis to defend. So it's very dangerous.
Right.
But so it's not that you should completely let your children out into the wild, because there's obviously consequences to
Right.
that.
You don't tell them to go play on the road, try to dodge the car to build a
Yeah,
better
don't get
character.
abducted, like protect yourself. But like, how there's definitely a middle ground that we could be pursuing to kind of inspire an identity that is secure enough to take on autonomy and freedom
Right.
post
And this doesn't have to even be an absolutist type of scenario. It's more
100%.
spectrum of we got to get away from wherever we're at today because
Yeah,
men are
it's a
growing
swing.
up afraid, sad, weak, and they're wasting away an entire generation. And it's like, look, things because this all even applies economically. One, jobs, wages, social security. It's like, okay, the more the numbers go down, the harder it is to maintain a system because there's less and less people to feed the pipeline that you ain't ever going to see a nickel of it. Sorry,
Yeah,
ain't ever
no.
I might not see any of it. Who knows? But it's there's we've got to at least move, pivot something, and take a little bit different generation. And I wish more people would actually bring that up. That is literally I rarely hear that, except that maybe strangely enough in kind of more fringe circles like the
Mhm.
MGTOW people and stuff like that. But I think there's very much a legitimate concern there. It's like, what about men?
Yeah.
Uh, the reality of it. Do you guys want a healthy society? You want to make babies? Have guys that are electricians, plumbers, and lumberjacks and engineers, and or they just going to sit in the dark someplace, wither away until late in life in the flicker of a TV screen playing Call of Duty?
Yeah. It's a sad concept, because I think growing up, a lot of my friends were guys, because I felt like they wanted to engage and have like deep conversations. But as I get older, and I mean, it could just be a maturity thing. Obviously, women and men mature at different levels, but as I'm in college, I'm really drawn to my female friendships. And I feel like now
Right.
we're more of like, oh, yeah, like this is, I can really get a lot out of this. And I'm seeing my male friends kind of, obviously, this isn't universal. I have guy friends that are extremely driven, but a lot of the time I'm seeing just a lack of passion or any direction, because I think it's a fear of failure and this
Right.
battling of like, well, I think I'm supposed to be this provider, but that doesn't really apply now, and I don't know
How
that
do
I
I
have
get
the
to be a
skills.
provider? Right. What
Yeah,
steps do I got to
how do
take?
I still provide without it being a demeaning or belittling thing to women in general? So it's like this weird
Right.
dynamic that we're now falling into, and as women are rising, there's still issues that women are facing, and there's still sexism, of course, but with the hyper focus being on that, men are definitely falling through the cracks.
Right. And kind of getting towards the end here, so I don't want to keep you because I know you have some other classes. I heard a rumor one time.
Yeah.
There's something about you driving a race car?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously you know my dad, but he has definitely specific interests, and I think he always wanted guys. So he kind of threw me into a bunch of different hobbies that he wanted me to do, very masculine hobbies, which I think tells a lot about my outlook on life. But the recent thing in the last couple of years, I say like 2020, I think is when it started. He was like, you know what? You need to learn how to drive, so you might as well learn how to drive a race car. Like, you got to be the safest out there, and
All right, I go along with that though.
yeah,
Right.
right. So it kind of just was a fun little side hobby, but it is really fun. I ended up not being able to play soccer, which I'd grown up my whole life playing, due to some injuries, and I really wanted that competitive nature, but I also wanted like an applicable skill, and so it was kind of a fun process to work on like mechanic skills, driving skills, and it's a really fun hobby, like golf. Like, it clears your mind. You really focus on what you're doing, and there's something very therapeutic about it. It's a very fun skill and
Consider
hobby.
sailing at some point when you live in a
I
place
have
that's got a lot more.
I have
Sailing, I always
sailed.
found like therapeutic.
Yeah, it's fun. I did that. I used to go to this camp that was on a dock in Washington on the Puget Sound, and we would sail. They taught us how to sail, and we'd capsize for fun, and we'd do little races and like little pirate ship, like try and get the other team to capsize. And I thought it was really fun, but I really couldn't get over how cold the water was. So I don't know if
Well,
sailing
right.
is
That's a
really
little bit
for
like
me.
Lake Michigan in July. You get
Yeah,
in the water and it burns. It's so
yeah.
cold, you know.
So
It's like,
I wouldn't say it's an enjoyable hobby. I'd definitely stick to cars, I think. But
well, there's always got the tropics. There's warm places you can do it.
yeah, yeah, I'm sure I
Okay, cool. I wasn't sure it's like if it was just something kind of toyed around with or whatever, but yeah, I had heard
I
it mentioned. It's
definitely, yeah, I wanted to pursue it at one point before college. It's like maybe I just don't go to college and I just try and do this race thing. Like I'm a woman, so a lot of sponsors are trying to pick up female drivers.
oh,
But
everything's just women, women, women these days, isn't
yeah, it's
it?
really great for me. But I didn't really actually have the skill set to do it long term. But rally, I'm not much of a track person. I really like the being out of control, but being in control.
Right. Well, knowing your dad, he probably could use a good mechanic. I mean, I don't know if I'd trust him.
He's better than me. I don't know the names for things. I just know what to do. So he laughs at me when I'm like, "Oh, give me the long thingy with the thing on the end," and he's like, "Okay."
Oh, that's great. Well, hey, I'm going to let you. I know you got busy today, so we're not going to go too long. But thank you, everybody, for tuning. Be sure to sub and subscribe. You got anything else for us today, Holland?
No, just keep on learning.
Right on. Life is for learning.
Life is for learning.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good day.